Okay, we're live. So welcome everybody. Nice to see so many faces on this call. My name is Michael Gooding. I am the growth services lead at Shopify, and I'm going to be hosting this session, and then I'll introduce you to the other two speakers as they get to their parts. I head up the growth services team at Shopify, and what we do is work with merchants on a one-to-one basis in paid engagements. But part of the work that we do is all about finding issues during those engagements and then taking those back to the product teams and then trying to get those implemented back into the product. And our mission is to make commerce faster for everyone. So at Shopify, we have the mission of making commerce better. Within our specific team, we very much focus on the speed of front-end stores. So today we're going to talk about one of the changes that we've identified in the field and then gone back to the product team, got some work implemented to hopefully give tools to fix the issue. But the issue needs to be fixed at a theme level, and that's where you lovely people come in. We're hoping that after hearing what we have to say today, that you're going to adopt some of these changes and then help us make commerce faster for everyone, which is our mission. So you are really here to help us today. You, as individuals, have been invited to this session because you work at a company or you have built one of our most popular themes on the platform. And between everyone that we've invited to this call, I think the themes are installed on nearly 500,000 websites. So when we're talking about making a big impact and difference, then ultimately the success of that kind of lies in your hands. Just a little bit of admin. We are recording this session and we will post it on a website. So let's all be friendly and nice. And when we get to the Q&A session, obviously try and keep it clean. If you do get any questions that pop up, feel free to use the Q&A app that's in Google Meet. You have to select the little icons down the bottom, the triangle, square, and circle, and then the Q&A. A couple of reasons for that. It allows people to upvote any questions you make and also allows us to just check that we've answered them, but also it keeps the chat free for some links that we're going to be putting in as we talk so that there's plenty of resources that hopefully you can take away with you to read up on after this session. So, what are we going to talk to you about? Ultimately, we're going to start by defining the problem that we encountered and talking more specifically about the metric it impacts and why that metric is important, and that's largest contentful paint, or LCP. We're then going to talk about the features and the changes that we've made and then tell you how you can introduce or implement them, I should say. And then finally, we'll end with a Q&A where if you've got any questions about anything to do with LCP, then feel free to ask them in the questions, or even if you've got a question about adopting the changes or any kind of performance-related questions or things that we've covered today, feel free to enter those as well. So let's make a start. We're lucky enough today to have a real expert on LCP with us, not just me talking and pretending. We've got Rick Viscomi joining us, who works at Google as a WebPerf DevRel engineer. For those of you who know Rick, you may recognize him from other things that he's involved in. He is responsible for the HTTP archive, which is I'm going to say it's an open source project, but ultimately it's a treasure trove of data about modern websites and performance. He also heads up the Web Almanac project as well. So another great project to look up if you're unaware of those. So I'm going to shut up and pass over to Rick, and he's going to tell you a little bit more about LCP and why it's important.
Great. Thank you, Michael. So hi, everybody. I'm Rick. It's great to be with you all. You're probably familiar with LCP as one of the 3 core Web Vitals metrics. These are the metrics that Google designates as the ones that are the most important to the user experience. So if you ever use like performance tools like Page Speed Insights or the Page Experience Report in Search Console, you've definitely seen LCP before. So let's talk about why LCP is a core Web Vital metric and why it's such an important metric to track. And the answer to that is right there in the name itself. So let's break it down. Starting with paint. So paint metrics correspond to the actual pixels changing on the screen. And this is much more useful than measuring something like the old load event that you might have been familiar with. The load event waits for all the resources to be fully loaded before firing, even if those resources are imperceptible things like images below the fold. And really, what good is measuring a 15-second load event if the user really felt like the page was ready 10 seconds earlier? So that's why paint metrics like LCP are much better representations of what the user is experiencing. But it's not enough to measure the time when something or anything is painted to the screen, because users don't really care that the page's background color changes. That would be more of what the first paint metric measures. But we know that users are on the page to perform some task, like buying products or reading an article, and the page's contents are how they accomplish that task, contents like text and media. And so we need to not only be measuring paints, but contentful paints. But of course, some content is more important than others. And while it's nice visual feedback to see the company logo appear, that doesn't actually help users complete their task any more quickly. In this case, the logo would be something that the first contentful paint metric would measure. So how do we decide which piece of content is the most important? Well, the best heuristic we have is its size. How big does it appear to a user? And so LCP is the largest piece of media or text on the screen. And these are typically your hero images, H1s, paragraphs, videos. And so to answer the original question, LCP is important because it is specifically designed to measure how quickly users feel like the page is ready to use. And just to give you an example, here we have the Shopify.dev page. And we could see its LCP element is the hero image. In this case, it's a div element with a CSS background image style. But with responsive design, you can imagine maybe the build any commerce experience heading or the paragraph of text below that as being the new LCP on a smaller screen instead, depending on how these lines of text flow. So the LCP element really depends on both the page's contents and the user's devices themselves. So the next logical question is, okay, how fast should it be? I think we can all agree that instant would be great, but more realistically, Google found 2.5 seconds to be a good target. And we didn't just pull this number out of a hat. We looked at two distinct things. The first is the quality of experience. And it's important to recognize that there isn't a single time after which all users would agree that the page feels slow. In reality, the user experience or the user perception is more like a distribution. And the cognitive science research shows that something that feels like an immediate response can actually fall anywhere in the range of 0.3 to 3 seconds. Or to quote the paper, very approximately 1 second. You might have seen 1 second thrown around as that number, and this is where it comes from. So once we have a range of values to shoot for, we look at their achievability. So using Google's public Chrome User Experience Report dataset, or CRUX, we look to see if at least 10% of websites could meet one of these thresholds. And it's not that every user experience needed to be this fast, only 75% of them. So we took the 75th percentile for each site. And what we found is that 2.5 seconds was the sweet spot that balances both user experience and achievability. So Sia is going to be sharing some aggregate Shopify data in just a minute, but I did want to call this out as a great example of why performance optimization really matters. Mateusz from the Shopify team wrote a really excellent case study about the improvements in Sunday Citizen, which is a Shopify site, what they saw to business metrics as a result of performance optimizations. And the takeaway that I want you all to get out of this is that improving LCP and also CLS, which is another core web vital metric, correlated with fewer bounces and more conversions. Specifically, though, I wanted to point out how exactly they were able to improve LCP performance. And it came down to these two things: making the LCP images discoverable and prioritized. Now, I'm not pointing this out because these optimizations were such novel opportunities that nobody else will see, but actually because these types of problems are everywhere. In fact, just earlier this year, my team called them out as two of the most effective ways to improve LCP performance. So let's dig into the biggest discoverability issue, which is lazy loading. And just to be very, very clear up front, lazy loading is a very good thing, but only when it's applied to the right elements, typically those below the fold. Using it correctly will help to avoid network contention with critical resources. And as a nice secondary benefit, it also loads fewer bytes by default until those things are scrolled into view. Lazy loading effectively tells the browser to wait to load the resource until it knows it will be rendered in or near the viewport. But here's the thing. The LCP image is a critical resource, and the browser can't know that it's going to be in the viewport until it's ready to start rendering it. First, it needs to load the markup, build the DOM, load the styles, and then figure out where everything's going to be laid out on the page. Meanwhile, while all of this is happening, that image could be loading, which is exactly the job of the preload scanner. So on the right, we have the markup for a picture of my dog, but it has a performance problem. Because it's set to loading equals lazy, the image is displayed much later than it otherwise would be. And the simple solution here is just to remove it from the image tag and any other LCP candidates that you have on the page. And while you're at it, you can also add in its place the fetch priority attribute. This is a new way to hint to the browser that a resource is critical to the user experience. And the reason why this is so effective is that images are low priority by default. And this hints to the browser that the image should be fetched at a higher priority. And so as a result, it outcompetes the less critical content for network resources, and it loads more quickly. So just to kind of wrap up now, both lazy loading and fetch priority are progressive enhancements. They're safe to ship to all of your users. And I would definitely recommend that you do not lazy load your LCP images. I beg you. But instead, you can use fetch priority equals high on them if you know with relative certainty that it's going to be your LCP image. So with that, I will pass it back off to Michael. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Rick. So that's the first part of this puzzle, which is, okay, LCP, what is the problem we're seeing here, what not to do? And in case anyone was like under any kind of illusion of what that message was, do not lazy load your LCP image. So let's move over then to what have we created, how do you implement it, and then maybe dig a little bit deeper around one of the problems we've seen. So I'm going to introduce you now to Sia. Sia works on my team. She is also, as well as being a member of my team, she's a Google developer expert, but she's also a Shopify performance expert too. So although we don't have an official qualification for that. So I'm going to pass over to you, Sia, and you can tell us a little bit about what you've helped implement, because this is a lot of your own doing this work. So I will shut up again and let you talk.
Great. Actually, can you give me access to the slides? I don't have the
Oh, yes, sorry.
power, or I can just tell you every time I want to change the slides. But hello, everyone. My name is Sia, as Michael said. I am excited to talk to you today about these new Liquid features so that we can help you make your job a little bit easier. Yes, I have the power. I had a He-Man flashback there. Child of the 80s, the power of Grayskull. Sorry. Anyways, back on track here. So why did we even go down this path? So it was actually a little bit more than a year ago I started seeing this trend, although this is more updated data. And if you look at Shopify versus a lot of other major platforms and frameworks, and this is data from the H2P archive, we can see that like 82.4% of Shopify pages are lazy loading their LCP image. Of course, this is for pages where the LCP element is an image. And this is bad. And it's also showing us that Shopify has a unique problem, right? Like, why is Shopify so much worse? So this tells me it's a systemic issue and it's not necessarily the theme developer's fault. So why does this happen? It happens because we never in the past gave you access to anything to understand like where a section might be on the page. Like we never gave you order or anything like that. So part of the goal of this work that we did was to start giving you more of that data so you could make smarter decisions without having to ask in the section settings if, for example, a section is above the fold. So what is the impact of that? So I ran a test on our blog website. So it's very basic. We don't have any apps. And we saw like a half-a-second improvement when we removed lazy loading from the blog image. And then I applied this to the Dawn default also. But this was actually a simple test on a simple site, right? The improvement could actually vary a lot depending on how much you have on that page. And also, of course, the user's device, their speed, and their network speed. So there's an impact, but this was just one test case. If we actually look across all of Shopify, we can see that there is a larger issue as well. So if we look at all Shopify pages, the ones that eager load their LCP are faster than the ones that lazy load. I should have put the P75 on here too. I forgot to do that, but I can promise you that it is slower to lazy load your LCP image. And why is that important again? So like taking a step back and looking at the data, LCP actually impacts bounce and conversion rates. Now this is aggregated sample data from all of Shopify because it's a lot of data and it's a short time period. The numbers themselves aren't important, but look at the shape of the curve because the shape of the curve is always the same no matter how we run this analysis. It will vary a little based on individual shops because what people sell, their price points, and the markets that they're in also impact these. So some shops might be more sensitive than others to speed. But we can see across the board that if your LCP is faster, your bounce rate is lower, and your conversion rate is higher. So let's get this back on track, and we're going to talk about these new Liquid features for performance. So first up, we have added a default lazy load attribute for the image tag. And the way that it works is if you have an image tag and without setting the loading attribute already, of course, if you set it yourself, we're not going to override it. So if you do not provide a loading attribute already, what it will do in the first 3 sections, those will be eager loaded. So there will be no lazy loading. Eager is the default. And then for all the remaining sections, it will apply a loading equals lazy. This is the current logic. This logic will probably change because we're going to try to optimize the data across all of Shopify. So if you want to be more control over that, you should apply your own logic. And I'm about to show you how you can do that as well. So we're also announcing some new section properties. First up, we have section index. I think folks have been asking for this for a while. And the section index is the one-based index of the section within its contextual location. I'll talk about what that means. But it's essentially the order, right? Like this section is first, second, third. And we wanted that to map to how we're already providing indices in Liquid. So like for the for loop index is a one-based index. So that's why that is one-based. And then we're also providing an index 0 if you prefer working with a 0-based index. I won't lie, I do get confused between the two. And then we also are giving you a section location. So what does that actually mean? Well, let's look at a few diagrams. So in a 2.0 kind of page, we usually have a few different locations on the page. We have a section group, like a header, and a template, so that's your content for layout, and then a section group footer. Of course, so these are your different location types, section groups and templates. And that section group, of course, can be header, footer, aside, and then there's also, you can make custom section groups as well. So, and then we also have static sections. So this is like if you dropped in a layout and you said render X section, that would be a static section. And it also works kind of similarly for the section rendering API. So now that we have some common terms, let's talk about like how the section, location, and index would apply to this example layout. So we have this header group at the top, and we have this static section that's just always there. And then we have our template or content for layout, and then our footer group. So starting with that header group, we have 2 sections in there. I call them a banner and a nav bar, not a banner image, I guess just banner text. Doesn't matter. But the location for both of those is going to be the section group names, which is header. And then their index will be 1 and 2 for the first and the second one. Then we jump down to this static section, which I'm calling an announcement. The location for that is going to be static, and then the index is nil because it's not really in any context, it's like in a global context. And this is also how the section rendering API works. And if you think about it, when you're using, for example, the section rendering API, you're just requesting the content for a single section, and you don't really know what's around it. So we can't really give you an index. So in these cases, you'd probably hard code what you wanted your loading attribute to be. Then we have our template, and there's two sections in there. I called it a product info section and a text with image. Both of those, their location is going to be template. And of course, the index is going to be 1 and 2. If you wanted the template name, you could do template.name. So if that was actually important for you for any reason. And then finally, we have our footer group. To me, that looks like a multi-column. The location is, again, the section group name. We wanted to give you a little bit more information when it was a section group. So that's why we're giving you the group name. So if, for example, you had something that was in both the header and the footer, you can make it perform differently based on which group it was in. And then the index will work the same as well. So the index resets, and it's a numerical index, but only within its location. All right. So what does custom lazy loading look like? I could assign a loading attribute, and if that section index is, for example, greater than 2. So if I wanted to override the current default, which is greater than 3, I could do it this way. I would assign that loading attribute to lazy if the index was greater than 2, and then if not, to eager. And you can see I'm using that image tag in here and setting loading equal to that variable loading. And now you could, of course, do this with an HTML image tag, but I do want to take a second here and encourage you to use that liquid image tag. It will give you some default lazy loading if you want it, but it also comes with some other benefits if you're not already aware. It will give you your height and width attributes by default, so you don't have to do that extra work to apply them, you know, to prevent layout shift. It will also provide more modern formats to the browser if that user's browser accepts them. So you don't have to do that work of, for example, using a picture tag to give a WebP and a JPEG and an AVIF. It will just do that for you. It will apply auto formats. But you, of course, you could use this logic either way if you're using the image tag or if you are using HTML image. All right, Rick also talked about fetch priority, and fetch priority is a great little trick, but we do want to be careful. So I want to say before I even start, don't overuse this. If we're going to set fetch priority high on like multiple things, we might make the browser less efficient than it would be if we set none of the fetch priorities, because it's pretty smart at setting those fetch priorities. It's just sometimes it doesn't know that something might be very important. And that very important thing is our LCP image. If that image has a high likelihood of being the LCP, you might want to set that priority to high. So this is actually what I did on our blog website, performance.shopify.com. I only applied this to the banner image section and the image with text, because those are both sections that have large images. And if they are the first, they are very likely to be the LCP element. So I said assign fetch priority to auto. So that's the default option. And then if that section is equal to 1, I'm going to go ahead and set it to high. And then this is how I apply it within the image tag, which of course you could apply within an HTML image tag as well. So all those things I just talked about are actually in more detail in both of these blog posts. This first one talks more about the concepts behind how that layout position impacts lazy loading, fetch priority, and also async or lazy CSS, depending on what you call it. So if you want to kind of understand what's going on behind the scenes there, check out that article. If you just want to see more code samples, we provide a bit more. Check out the other article, which is more focused just on the announcement of those features. And they're both on performance.shopify.com. I know Michael's been dropping a lot of links there. But if you go there, they're on the homepage currently because there still are more recent blog posts. And before I totally give it up, I want to announce, oh, wait, where's my image? It's not there.
Is it lazy loaded?
It's so weird. I gave there's supposed to be a link and oh, you started it. Can you kill it and restart it? Sorry, Michael.
You know my technical ability. Okay.
Well, you don't have to give me control. Just like, stop share and reshare.
Presenting. Here you go. Let's go again. Right.
You must have been really eager and started this ahead of time.
Well, no, I was practicing because, as you know, I'm not very good at these sorts of things. So.
No, you're great. I don't know why you're saying that. Oh, that is still not it, but it's fine.
It's not, is it?
Okay. Yeah, like why is it not there? In my version, there is still a
It's
QR code and link. Anyways, well, while he's doing that, I will tell you that we are having a web performance workshop. And we do this already for agencies and companies, but we wanted to have an open enrollment version. So like if you're an independent theme dev or your shop just doesn't have enough devs to warrant your own workshop, we're doing an open one. It's going to be over 3 days, so like 3-hour sessions each, although there's a break, so it's like 8 hours of content. But if you want to get better at optimizing web performance, this is your chance to do it. Yay, it's there. So there's a QR code for you and then tiny URL, or if you just go to our website and search for workshop, you can find it that way too. It is limited to only 15 people. If you're in Europe, let us know and I will give you a different link to pay, because Shopify has different bank accounts apparently. But so really excited about that. And then Michael, I'll let you.
Okay.
Here.
Thank you very much, Sia. So hopefully we now know why LCP and everything is important, why we looked at this work, and then you've now got the tools to do it. So I'm going to open up the Q&A. It was very quiet in there just before. Now, if I need to stop the recording, I'm happy to do that. Oh, there we go. Can we get the Europe link?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'll just drop it in here for you. You can keep going.
Okay.
Should we just use the chat since
yeah, let's just use the chat. We're finished posting URLs, right? So you can use the chat now if people want to ask questions in here. I don't know, maybe everything was super clear. I was hoping someone would have a really, really hard question for Rick about like LCP or something. I was interested. I've got a question for you then, Rick, because I'm just going to monopolize the time here. You mentioned about like you picked a metric or a boundary where only 10% or where 10% would pass that metric. So what happens when the whole of the web and like all of our Shopify merchants and all of our great theme developers on this call go and improve the LCP now because they're going to implement this change, and then the boundary for 10% gets down to like 2.2? Does that boundary change moving forward, or?
So the boundary is like a lower bound where at least that percent of websites should be able to achieve the good threshold. So maybe it might be I think we're at like 60-ish% of websites right now having good LCP, which is good, not the best, obviously. Maybe let's say 100% of websites are having good LCP. That's at the 75th percentile. It's entirely within the realm of possibilities that Google will like raise the bar. And by raise, I mean lower the threshold. So
yeah.
Now it's like, all right, 2.5 seconds seems pretty easy. Let's get a little bit more competitive, let's say, and make 1.5 seconds the new threshold for good LCP. That might happen, but it won't happen without a lot of notice. We usually tend to give like 6 months notice. And also one of the, you could say like guarantees of the Core Web Vitals program is that we're not going to thrash the ecosystem and make these types of changes more than once a year. So I would go out on a limb and also say like, we would probably make a big announcement like that around Google I/O middle of the year. So look out for those moments for any sort of changes like that.
I guess like with IMP as well, there'll be a big runway to when that's actually changed as well. So it'll be an announcement, an I/O that it'll change in sort of best part of 12 months or something, right?
Exactly. So this year at I/O, we announced that interaction to next paint will be replacing one of the current Core Web Vitals metrics, first input delay. That was May this year, but that change won't take effect until March of next year. So plenty of time.
Excellent. All right. Thank you very much for that. So Jared's posted a question here. I don't know who's going to take this one. So is native lazy loading ready to be rolled out without polyfills? It seems Safari and iOS are not ready yet. And he's actually put a link to Can I Use with search lazy, which I'm surprised about.
Yeah, it is available on all the major browsers. And then if you look at Firefox, if you look at the little star, it said it supports for images, but not yet iframes. So for images, it's supported across all major browsers.
Yeah, and I think you have to go back to like 16.3 for Safari, and we're on 17.1 when it had a little flag next to it.
Yeah,
so
yeah. I will say in the past, though, like earlier, like several years ago, when I was building sites, I kind of looked at it as like a progressive enhancement anyways. Like for one, you're not going to break anything. like if something's not supported, the way most features are rolled out now is that if a browser doesn't support it, it just ignores that part. It doesn't cause like some weird error. But the other thing I thought about, which is probably not really fair, but if someone I was working on a website for an escape room in New Orleans. So if you think about the demographic, it was people who had money to travel to New Orleans and also go to an escape room, and they had iPhones, which are nicer phones that perform faster and are usually on faster networks too. So it didn't. The fact that they couldn't lazy load then wasn't quite as important anyways, and I didn't want to harm everyone else. Now, I will say if you're, for example, using lazy sizes right now, you might want to consider pulling it out because this is the other thing that Rick can talk about too. IMP is going to be your next Core Web Vital and starting in March of 2024. And right now, first input delay, FID, is like a participation award. And so everyone's green on FID. And it's going to be harder to hit green on IMP. I mean, it's not going to be absurdly hard. I think it's more like 60-something% of sites are going to pass it. But you want to start pulling out excessive JavaScript. And if you don't really need it, then you might want to pull it out. And one of those articles, I talked about addressing some of the other nice features it has, like auto sizes. But yeah, so check that out and kind of go through there. I probably spent too much time on that answer, but
probably. I think if we summarize, it's like, yeah, just use native. It's going to cover a big enough scope of browsers nowadays, right? And get rid of the polyfills. So Miguel and Taylor both have kind of the same question, but I'm going to read them both to you. I think it's aimed at you, Sia. So the image tag has the preload attribute to add link preload headers for the image. Would it be more helpful to use this to hint to the browser that the image should be loaded ASAP than fetch priority attribute? And then Taylor's kind of got more of a generic one, which is, could you just talk more about the preload attribute within the image tag? So I think you could probably cover both of these off with the same answer.
Yeah, to be honest, I mean, because that predated all of our whole team, and I don't know if Mateusz or you, I don't really have context of why we added that preload attribute. Because for me, if it's if this code is going to be in your actual HTML, then you don't need to preload it. The only reason why you might want to preload it is only because we apply an early hint for you, but it still remains to be seen whether that early hint benefit is as good as for example, fetch priority. Like, I just wouldn't use that preload attribute. The main reason why you want to preload is because it allows Chrome, actually, Rick can talk about this, but allows Chrome to know that a resource is needed because it can't already see it. The preload scanner will actually, I know it's confusing. So I used to call it the look-ahead pre-parser because it was less confusing. But Chrome actually scans all of the HTML to know which links it needs to start downloading sooner so that it can prioritize them. So you don't need to preload something that's already in the HTML. If you are using a JavaScript framework for your LCP and there's no way to know it in the HTML, then that's a case where you might want to preload. But if you want to use early hints, you could do it. I just don't see that much of a benefit. And honestly, I would pull out preload and instead replace it with fetch priority if you think it's going to be the LCP. I don't know if y'all have more to add there. Also, Mateusz is on our team and he's in this call, but he can add stuff too.
Yeah, Mateusz is also, go on, Mateusz, you go.
I posted a link because we wrote an article around both resource hints that are the most common ones across Shopify. So for the pre-connect and preload. And in the preload section, I'm talking about when it may make sense to preload, but everything that Sia said was perfect. I think I'm also linking to one of the articles that talk about how you can hide resources from the preload scanner. And if you look for those patterns on your page, you can actually adjust those and make sure that it can find it and that you don't have to do any preload. So everything that Sia mentioned, like JavaScript lazy loading, but also using background images instead of the actual images. For example, when you want to retain we see it a lot when people want to do a cover image of something. In these cases, we usually always suggest sticking with a standard EMG element and object fit in CSS exactly.
Yeah.
So that's definitely preferred way.
Yeah, I think one of the things just to add to this is don't do what I see often, which is where someone's read an article about preload and how it can be useful, and then they just go and preload everything, like 20, 30 objects, and basically you just end up with the page or all these resources, and they're probably loading before like even the main critical CSS is loaded, so it actually ends up slowing things down. So just be aware, like the bandwidth available to the browser in that very kind of first like half a second to 1.5 seconds should be like sacred ground, and like only ever suggest something to go in there as big as an image if you are 100% sure it's going to be used and it's going to speed everything else up.
I actually want to add to, like, any change you make, just test before and after too. I'm dropping an article Michael actually wrote a while back about how to benchmark and compare using web page tests, which is a great tool. Sorry, I think someone has their hand up.
It's Rick.
Oh, hi, Rick.
It's very polite of you, Rick.
Got to use the features. So I just wanted to add one other thing, which is that preloading and fetch priority are complementary features. Preloading is more about when the resource loads, when does it start loading, and fetch priority is once it started loading, how high of a priority should it be relative to other resources that are also loading. So you can actually set fetch priority equals high on a link rel preload in either the header or the meta tag in the HTTP head. And they definitely do work together. But just to like reiterate what has already been said, you probably don't need it if the image is already discoverable in the static source code. It's really useful for things that are one level deeper, for example, like a CSS background image.
Perfect. Thanks, everyone. All right, we've got about 6 minutes left. I reckon we've got time for one more question if anyone's got it. If not, we can wrap up.
Questions still welcome. Or let us know if you need any extra.
Yep. Just a reminder, if you haven't already, like just see if you can copy out all of the comments that we've been putting in. There's like a treasure trove of links that we've now got as well. So
I didn't mention like fetch priority is fun because it also has low. So for example, I'm just going off topic because we don't have a question. I'm going to fill the space or fill the time. So for example, if you have like a carousel or something, you can have fetch priority high on the first item, but maybe low on the later items if it's, especially if it's above the fold.
Or just not have a carousel at all, let's be honest.
I know, right? That's more I know, but if you're like building themes for the shop, you have to have those. But yeah, I'm definitely anti-carousel. Should I drop the link?
On that bombshell, yeah, I know what you're going to put in now.
I know.
Okay, go on. Drop your link and I'll finish off.
Right. I'm still waiting for Google to cooperate.
Cool.
It's Rick's fault. No, I'm kidding.
Okay, well, Sia's going to interrupt me by dropping a link. There you go. So Sia's dropped a link, another really useful resource. All right, let's finish up. So first of all, thank you everyone for attending. Hopefully this has been useful. As we mentioned at the beginning, we do really need you as theme developers to adopt these new features and try and solve that problem that Sia talked about around that like 80% of LCP images loading. That's like ridiculously too high. And we can only do that with the help of everyone on this call. We've posted some links in here about performance.shopify. That is our blog. We have lots of topics on there. Again, have a read if you haven't already found it. And again, if there's some useful stuff on there, then great. There's also a contact us form on there as well. So if you are interested in working with us in paid engagement, or if you just want to get in contact and talk about something, then feel free to use that contact us form. It will be myself, Sia, and Matthias who get those emails. We've talked about the workshop. There's registration pages as well. So again, thoroughly recommend that if you want a bit more of a deep dive on performance, and Sia will be taking that workshop. And then finally, the one big thing from me is if you do adopt these features, we really want to hear about it. Like, let us know whether it's via email, you've got my email, or whether it's in this partner Slack channel, which I know Sia and Matthias are probably a little bit more active than me in there, or it's our contact us form. Like, let us know, did these actually help? Have you implemented them? Have you managed to improve LCP for any of your customers? And if so, like, we can then go and look in, like, we actually have RUM data, real user data for all of our merchants. So again, we could look in and see, did it actually make a difference in the real world? And then also we could go and look and see, did that correlate to like those business metrics we showed you earlier on as well? So, you know, we are super interested to hear your feedback, because we obviously need to validate the work that we've done and see that it's actually helping as well. So with that, I thank Rick and Sia for explaining brilliantly the topics that they had today, and I thank everyone else for joining. Like I said, we will post this recording on our blog at some point, and I'll send it out to all the email addresses that we had for this invite as well, at this event rather. So thanks everyone. Hope to see you again soon.
Thanks y'all. I feel like I have to do at least one of these, except I can't do it right because I don't do it in real life.